Welcome to this long-term plan briefing this afternoon, where I believe we're going to start crunching some numbers maybe. So, welcome to those who are online. Who have we got online?
I just have a small announcement to make.
Hang on, we'll just get to the end of this. Who have I got online?
Fossil fuel princess.
What princess?
Councillor Cooper's online, and Liz Coe has been crowned Councillor of the Millennium. She's quite happy about that. So I'll pass over to Mark and the team. The presentation's up on LG Hub if you want to look at it that way and flick backwards and forwards. Welcome to elected members, staff, mana whenua representatives today. And we'll kick off. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. So good afternoon, everyone. Today, myself and Jing and Cheryl will take you through today's public debrief. So it's not so much of a workshop; it's more just an overview. It's a presentation which we'll take you through. So what you may have noticed is a new presentation has just been loaded on LG Hub, and that's behind me as well. We just noticed literally about 15 minutes ago that the CapEx, the one slide that we wanted to talk to you about CapEx had mistakenly fallen off the presentation. So it's back, and we'll take you through that. So I think in terms of, I'm happy to take questions as we go through. I am mindful, we are live streaming. I am mindful that you have the presentation on LG Hub in front of you. And I just ask that we keep questions to where we're at in the presentation. I know it's very, there's huge temptation to probably jump a few slides, but if we could, happy to answer any questions as we go through, but where we're at in the presentation would be really, really helpful, because I think going back and forth, but we'll just see how that goes. So, in terms of, we've got a presentation for you today, and we've also got one on Thursday. And so, as the Mayor has said, this is really the next series of presentations are sort of getting into the nuts and bolts. It's getting into the finances. It's getting into what is our average rates increase looking like, what is our debt profile, and what is our capital works program. So we know we've got quite a lot to discuss in this space. So for today, what this discussion points are is we're just going to actually jump straight into it and show you where we're at in terms of the average rates increase. It is a journey for those of you that have been here before. We generally started a number and we work together and we land or we finish up on a different number. We'll then have a very quick high-level view of years 1 to 3 capital works program. We'll then have a look at you've been doing some work on Vision Kapiti. There was a recent workshop where staff asked you what would you like to see in the LTP. So we know that work is in train, and so there's one slide that just lets you know that we know that we've still got to look at that. Then we look at some options. Where we're at is probably not where you would like the rates increase to be. So what are the options to reduce rates a bit further? And then almost on the finish, we summarise what are the key takeouts for today's presentation. And then right at the very end, we will let you know what we're talking to you about on Thursday. So I think a good picture is better than 1,000 words. So so this is most of you will be really familiar. This is with this style of presentation. It's called our waterfall chart. And to cut to the chase, whilst we recognise we've got still a wee way to go, our starting position, the average rates increase for year 1 of the LTP is sitting at 12%. And so what we'll do is the next few slides will take you through the detail. How do we get to 12%? So what this slide is doing on the very far left, it's showing you what is the total rates revenue for the current financial year of 23-24, and that's $90.8 million. So just a little note on the bottom, a 1%. So if we want to reduce rates by 1%, we need to strip out 908,000. 0.5% is half of that, which is 454. And then as I think we start to get closer to the end of November, we'll be looking for the 0.1s and 0.2s and 0.3s. And 0.1 is 91,000. So those I think are key metrics to keep in your head. 91,000, 454, and 908. That's the quantum of dollars that we talk about when we talk about reducing rates. We have a question.
I do have a question. So, do we get to see the predicted increase in rates with growth as well? Like, there must be a prediction of what we're going to get to over the next, within the long-term plan?
Just hold that. That's part of the benefit of waiting until we get through a chunk of it, isn't it, Mark?
Yes. Thank you, Your Worship.
Sorry,
Yes and yes.
I will just leap in because at some stage I'm going to challenge the assumption that a rates rise is a bad thing. Because if you take the argument in extremis, then we are austerity. We've seen where that goes, and we see who gets hit hardest by austerity. So I think a case can be made for a rates rise of 12%. Happy to make the case. I don't think will be a winning case at this table, but the idea that the assumption, I just think we should really be thinking about the assumption, because a 12% rate rise isn't full of lollipops and candy floss. It's full of practical, necessary stuff, one assumes. So the idea that at some stage we will be cutting necessary stuff and that those are hard decisions to make, sometimes the really hard decision is to not make those cuts. So I just think that's something that people should bear in mind. Yeah.
So thank you for that. I don't see any further questions, so I'll carry on. So I'll talk you through the slide, and then we will go through the presentation in more detail of each one. So the first key driver of the rates increase is the personnel budget. So this is staff salaries, and you can see from behind me it's an increase of 1.1% or $1 million. Now, traditionally, that increase is always above 3%. So that's a really, really good starting point, and we'll take you through how we got to that. Our big friend, depreciation, we know we build assets and we have revaluations for those assets, and in today's market, depreciation tends to go up. So the full impact of depreciation on next year's budget is an increase of 6.1% or $5.5 million. So SLT have spent a lot of time looking at what can we do with that depreciation. So we'll take you through a proposal to reduce depreciation by 5.1% or 4.6 million. So that's having quite a big impact on keeping our rates at 12%. Then, of course, we've got interest. It's our net interest expense. So we've got debt. We've got existing debt. We've also got a capital works program this year, so our debt's rising, and we've got a capital works program next year, so our debt's going to rise as well, because we do actually. In terms of when we build new assets, it's funded through a combination of subsidies, development contributions, rates, and debt. So the net impact of that, and interest rates are high. So that's going to increase our rates by 3.6% or 3.2 million. We've got inflation. We've simply applied the inflation that's been provided to us by independent experts, Burl, who provide all the indices for local government. That's had an impact of, or an upward pressure of 1.5%. And then we will spend a little bit of time on this. So the current year's financial year benefited from federal funding. So we were able to reduce rates by 3.5% because we reassigned $3.2 million of federal funding to fund the water and stormwater, wastewater and stormwater. Tranche 2 has been taken away by central government, and we talked a lot about not kicking the can down the road. When we made that decision with yourselves, the Three Waters, Affordable Waters, was kicking in 1 July 2024. So we are in a position where there's $3.2 million of funding that is no longer there, so it creates a hole. Then we've got we've been through our budgets. We've identified some areas where we need some more operational funding to the order of $2 million. So that was a lot higher, as some of you would have seen in the slide already, and it's been kept at $2 million. So that gives us a total rates requirement of $102,500,000, which is 12.8%. But as we always do, we actually express our rates increase net of growth. So in other words, what is the rates increase for existing ratepayers? So growth is 0.8, which is where we're sitting at as at the 7th of November. We're saying that we're indicating to you that it's an average rates increase of 12%. So now the next 3 slides will take you through each of those bars. It'll take you through the detail. Okay. So the first thing we just wanted to get straight into personnel, into staff costs. We all know depreciation, but we wanted to get straight into the staff. So it's important, and I'll take you through this really slowly. So I'm going to be talking to you about that column there. So this is as at the 31st of October 2023. So full-time staff in the council equates to 405. That's what we've got. Now this total does change, and so it was at a point in time. So we've got 405 full-time equivalent positions at the council. We know that we have got, for various reasons, we've got 10 contractors backfilling 10 roles. We've also got 11 positions that are actively being recruited at the moment, so they're not yet filled, but we're actively in the marketplace. And there's 10 positions that are currently on hold. So as at now, our best estimate is we believe we've got 405 full-time equivalents. There's movement for 31, so we think by 30 June 2024, we'll have 436 full-time equivalents at the council. So when we look at the budget, so the next column is, am I going the right way? There we go. So when we did the annual plan budget, we actually budgeted for not 436, we budgeted for 452 full-time equivalents. But what we spoke to you about is a vacancy loading. So we know that we have staff turnover throughout the year. And we know that on average it takes 3 months from when a staff member resigns to when you've actually replaced that position with a full-time equivalent. So we do what's called a vacancy loading. So we do an adjustment because we know that we're not going to have 100% staff in the seats the whole year. We will have some vacancies. So we generally look at staff turnover. We take an estimate of how long it takes to fill that role, and then that equates to a dollar value. So it's just a mathematical equation. And then we get a dollar value, and then we translate that dollar value to an FTE count. So we applied a vacancy adjustment of 16 staff during this current financial year. So the net salary cost to the council was for 436 full-time equivalents. So that's great news. We're forecasting to be on budget as at June 2024. So when we sat with SLT and we sat with Darren, first thing we looked at what are our staffing levels. Because surprise, surprise, the long-term plan year 4 had budget at 452. In fact, it actually affected even more than that. So working with Darren and the senior leadership team, so this has been probably one of the biggest reductions we've made. So staffing levels will remain capped at 436. So that's the proposal. So we're saying in the last column, we believe we're going to finish at 436. Our chief executive is proposing to cap that at 436. But we still know that we're not going to have 100% staff in 24-25. There will be turnover. So we've applied a vacancy loading. So we've looked at council's actual staff turnover over the last 3 years. For 22-23, it was 17.5%. For 21-22, it was 27%. That was COVID, so that was astronomically high. And prior to that, it was 15%. So we've taken an average over the last 3 years, and that brought us to 20%. So we've calculated a vacancy loading of a 20% turnover of staff, and we're still sticking to, on average, 3 months to fill a position. Some are longer, and some are faster, but we're sticking to 3 months. And we could argue that there might be a lot of people hitting the marketplace shortly, so we could fill those positions faster. But we want to be prudent, so that's what we've stuck with 20% turnover in a 3 month. So that equates to a dollar value, which is 2.2 million, and when we convert that to a full-time equivalent, it's 21 positions. So the salary line that's hitting our draft budgets is actually 415. So that is quite a drastic step change. So that's why personnel is only 1.1% as opposed to we're north of 3%. So the key takeout on this slide is that we're proposing a self-imposed cap of 436 for this current financial year, and maintaining that for next. So now we look at some of our personnel budget.
Sorry, Nigel, I got ahead of you just. Mark, just a quick question. With that cap there and those vacancies that are likely to be in place, are we pretty sure that we're going to be able to maintain our service levels, or are there some areas that we're going to allow a little bit of slippage if we're going to be having less growth in staff?
I actually think that's a question for the Chief Executive.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Janet.
Thanks, Cam. It's a good question. And we get to that. It's coming. Yeah. So there's always balances. There's always trade-offs. Coming back to Nigel's point, it is what is good and what is not good. And that's the discussion that we will have to be having.
Great. Nigel?
Yeah, mine relates to, we're now in a significant state of flux about Entity C, but my understanding is that 70, I think it was about 70 of our staff would have been transferring to Entity C. Let's assume that happens, or something of its equivalent happens. So that would just take 70 off that top line. Is that how we would work that? And then, the impact of that then would be pretty significant, I assume.
Thanks, Nigel. Yep, that's a really good question. So throughout the process, that's what we've been working to, is the creation of the 4 entities, which is now the 10 entities, going from a 1 July 24 out to I think it's October 25-ish for us is what we were looking at. Now DIA have indicated that until they know what the shape of the new government looks like and what direction they're going to take us in, that's all on hold. So we're in a bit of a state of flux at the minute. But we know what the current legislation indicates for us, and that is that transfer to the new entity and also the surrender of the debt, that goes with it over a 5-year period, which was also up for debate, going to the 10 entities and us moving from C to G, entity G, or the Wellington region, for want of a better word. So in the absence of, I guess, anything absolute from the new government that is being formed, that's where we're sitting at the minute. We certainly aren't hanging our hat though on that progressing, and this for me, and certainly for SLT, is our best foot forward in the circumstances that we know.
Just to follow on from that then, is it
Sean's got a comment about that as well.
Yep.
Just the numbers, I guess. So 70 as a number is a combination of obviously we have FTEs, we have full-time people doing Three Waters. That's pretty straightforward. But then we have a number of parts of the organisation that do bits of, so you've got rates, you've got the call centre, you've got they've got like, might be 0.5 of someone's role, 0.3. So but when you add all that up in terms of a work resource, that's the number. But when you actually add it up in terms of how many people might exit the organisation as part of that, then that's a different number. So I wouldn't, get hung up on the 70 and say, oh, well then, bang, why isn't that showing 70 less staff? Because, as Darren said, we don't know what that might look like, but just be aware it's not a, not a straightforward link back to numbers.
Sort
Do
of,
you have a follow-up?
yeah, sort of big scrap for all the empty office space. Everyone wants a bigger office. So we're going to run, and I guess the timings, everything here is, so we're going to run sort of like a shadow process, because the timing for the LTP, the government are under enormous pressure from 72 entities that I'm aware of who are going, we're all in that same position, and they're getting screamed at from all directions. So they can't, it's not something they can sit on their hands about. So I just wondered, do we, nightmare for you guys, but do you run some kind of shadow process that if this was to go ahead, and because the impact of that would be pretty significant, right?
Yeah. So internally we've got a transition unit which is tasked with keeping up with announcements from the Crown, and we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to adjust, but just in terms of the starting position that we presented probably a month ago is no. We aren't going to effectively be doing two LTPs, one that we talk about and one behind the scenes. Under legislation at the moment, and we will follow legislation. Under legislation at the moment, Three Waters is in the first 2 years, and it's mainly because at the moment we're told that Entity G won't physically be able to actually collect, raise its own invoices and collect its own revenue. So at the minute, what the plan is that the long-term plan document and the numbers and the financials will have the Three Waters in for years 1 and 2. And if that changes, it doesn't automatically mean we have to amend the LTP. The financial strategy will need to show what we think the impacts of transitioning, how that will affect our debt levels, how it will affect our rates, how it will affect our capital works program. The infrastructure strategy doesn't have to have the Three Waters, and it won't. So that's the path that we're taking, is just really sticking to the letter. And if the legislation changes, then we'll come back to the table and say, well, actually, we've got to do this step change. But it's hard enough doing one LTP, never mind two. So that's our preference at the moment, is just to follow the legislation.
My final one. Yeah, it's anticipating the next slide, I guess. But in terms of depreciation, I'm assuming again a significant portion of that is on Three Waters infrastructure. So again, that could be a significant variable, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So we will get to that, and there's a proposal on the table, and there's an upside and a downside. So we'll talk about that when we get there. Oh, we've got a question from.
Oh, look, it's not a question, it's a comment. I just want to say well done on the staffing levels, because I know myself and probably Lawrence Kirby in particular made a strong plea in this area when we're looking at the annual plan, and I think this is a really good position to go to our community with, to say we've listened and we're actually cutting our cloth to suit. So well done on in terms of achieving those staffing levels. Just want to say that. Thanks.
Thanks.
Kind of is.
Yeah. So thanks for the vote of confidence, Liz. we may test that a bit later on when we get to, and it won't be today, but we will be signalling with you the level of service discussion and what that might mean for our community. So it's been a different approach, and it's probably been one done in isolation. You know, there are a number of discussions at the SLT table, and this is us putting some options forward. Thank you.
Great. Let's press on.
So thank you. So moving on with slide number 5. So just to take you through this, and gauging from the room acceptance of the proposal, I won't spend too long on this, but it's important that you see the numbers anyway. So I'm starting in the left-hand column. So we're looking at the salary costs for the current financial year, 23-24. So that the salary cost for 436 FTE, so the net costs of 436 in the current year is 41 million. These are just the budgets. This is what we approved, and this is the budget when you adopted the annual plan. So it's 41 million. I'm just going down the column. And then there's a whole lot of other costs that get added to personnel, which is your superannuation. We have overtime, standby allowances. We have a higher duties allowance for emergency management. We have staff training costs. We have ACC, etc., etc. So there's a whole lot of costs that go on top of staff salaries. So the subtotal is 44.2 million. We've done a vacancy loading of 16 FTE in the past. And then with our staff, we actually do look at the salaries. We recover some of those staff costs to other expenditures and OPEX. So, for example, legal. Some of our staff are here to do litigation, so we code those costs to our legal expenditure. But we also have staff that are here to work in our capital works program. So that time is capitalised because they wouldn't otherwise be here if we weren't building the assets. So they're an integral cost of that asset. So when we take those two numbers out, we go from 44.2 to a total personnel budget of 35.9. That's the current financial year. So we've looked at the first, and it's just year 1 of the LTP. We've got another 9 years to do. But year 1, we've said that the self-imposed limit of 436. So the starting position would be, well, the salary is exactly the same. So it's 41,072. But we know in the current financial year, we've been through a remuneration round, which is staff increases. So in the budget was 3%, and the staff increases were 5%. So we've had to increase the budget by 2%. So that's an uplift of 843. And that budget is needed so that we're actually covering what we're currently paying today. And then we are anticipating a remuneration increase next year called the 2024 remuneration round. And we budget for this all the time, and we're transparent with you. And so we've budgeted for up to a 6% increase across the board. That's for staff in the collective, and that's for staff that are not in the collective. So that's an uplift of $2.5 million. And then we've got those other costs on top of that. So that goes, we've made provisions for overtime, standby allowance. We have done a step change. There is a provision in there for staff that are involved in our emergency management. There's a lot of time that they commit to that. There's a lot of training, and there's a lot of responsibility in that area. And to make that work, you actually, there's benefit in actually rewarding staff for doing that. So that takes us to 48 million. And then, as we've said, we've applied that vacancy allowance where we've looked at the turnover from the last 3 years, which is 20% as an average, and we've applied 3 months to fill a role. So that's $2.2 million reduction in the salary costs. And then we still know that we've got staff that actually allocate their time to specific operational projects, for example, legal. And then we've increased the staff recoveries for CapEx. So we've had a look at our capital works program, the staff that are here to do the CapEx, and we actually think we'll be capitalising more of staff costs on our capital work program. So our total personnel budget, what we're budgeting for, is 36.9 million. So it's a total uplift of $1 million. And as I said, we've sat here at the start of our journey many times before, and personnel is causing a 3.5–4% rates increase. So I think it's so that's the $1 million. That makes up the waterfall chart saying $1.5 million, and it's a 1.1% increase for rates, and that's how it's broken down for you to see.
I have a question, thank you. Yes. So in relation to the superannuation, what percentage is paid to staff, or does it vary?
Yeah. So look, I don't have the precise detail, but for most staff around KiwiSaver, an employer contribution is 3%. Individual contributions can be anything up to 10%, but there could be some staff that are in very old local government contracts, but majority are on 3%. The employer contribution is 3%.
Thank you.
Okay, depreciation. So our good friend depreciation, and it's big. It's having a huge impact on our rates increase. So I'll take you through this. So for the current year, our depreciation is 29. The annual plan has got depreciation of just over $29 million. That's what we've budgeted for the year. That's obviously taking into account what assets do we have at the start of 23-24, what assets are we building, and we've worked out that it's going to be 29 million. But we also have we don't fully rates fund all our depreciation. We have unfunded depreciation, and that's 3.5 million. So the total rates funded depreciation for the current financial year is 25.5 million. So we then had a look at what do we think our depreciation is going to be for year one of the LTP. So the starting position would be what is the depreciation for existing assets? So it's going to be the $29 million because we've still got those assets. So it's an annual charge. So it's the same. It's 29 million. We've then increased the depreciation by 745,000. So that relates to a depreciation from roading. We did a full roading revaluation as at 30th of June 2023. And what happened is we estimated what the revalued amount of our roading asset would be and what depreciation would flow from that. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a timing difference. We actually adopt the annual plan on or before the 30th of June, but we actually only we finish the audit 31 October. So the actual revaluation uplift of roading was higher than what we had planned to do. And so there's higher depreciation, and that does flow through, and that's what the auditors do look at. So that is going to cost us. So it's not in the 23-24 budget, but we need to put it in the budget for 24-25. So it's simply costing us more to depreciate roading than what we had planned to do. And then we've gone up $1.5 million for roading. So it's the estimated uplift in depreciation for the three waters is at 30 June 2024. So the last time we did a full revaluation of the three waters assets was at 30 June 2022. And we think we've done a couple of desk valuations to make sure that our auditors are happy and that we're reflecting our three waters assets at fair value. But we also agreed with them that we wouldn't flow the depreciation through the books. We would only flow it through the books on a proper full-scale revaluation. And so we've had the benefit of having desktop valuations, and we believe that there's going to be an uplift in depreciation to the three waters assets because we are doing a full revaluation 30 June 2024, and we think that it's going to increase depreciation of the three waters assets by 1,492. It's $1.5 million. Then we know we've got a capital works program this year. We're anticipating that the depreciation from, we've got $89 million of capital. The capital works program for the current financial year is $89 million. We think that the uplift in depreciation for the three waters will be 770,000, and for non-three waters assets will be 2,977. So it's a total of $3.8 million. We think that's going to be the increase in depreciation based on the assets that we're building. And then so that's what our activity managers are telling us, that we will finish this, we will build that, we will deliver it. But as we always do, finance applies a little bit of a haircut. So we've said, well, for planning purposes, we think you're only going to achieve 75% of the $89 million, which is 67 million. And actually, of that $67 million of new assets that you build, only 60% of those assets will be in use. Only when they're in use do you depreciate them. It's called a consumption charge. That's what depreciation is. So even though we say, well, if we did everything that we said we were going to do, we'd have $3.8 million of depreciation flowing through the books, but we're applying a haircut based on experience. So we think we'll reduce that by 1.1 million. And then we've also got vested assets, so Old State Highway 1. So it's Old State Highway 1 will be given to us. This is Mackay's Crossing to Peka Peka. When it comes across to us, we recognise it as revenue, but of course it is an asset, but it is a liability because we have to maintain that. So that will increase our depreciation by a further estimated 683,000. And then we've got our unfunded depreciation of 3.5 million. So in total, when we look at all those factors, put them in, we think that the total rates funded depreciation is $31.1 million, which is an increase of $5.6 million. So that's significant. So we've really thought about this and scratched our heads and thought, well, what could we do? What could we do to reduce this burden on our ratepayers, because it happens to us year on year on year. So this is the proposal. So I talked to you about the $1.5 million uplift to the Three Waters depreciation. What the proposal is don't put that burden on the ratepayers next year. So we're in limbo. We're in a state of flux. We know that there will be change, but we don't know what the change is. At the moment, we're still anticipating to transfer the assets and to be repaid the debt. So what we're proposing is do not rates fund the uplift in depreciation for the Three Waters. For every dollar of depreciation that you don't fund by rates, you're borrowing. So we've already had agreement from DIA to $110 million of debt. We've done a lot of work together, and we've said that the amount of debt that relates to Three Waters is 110 as at 30 June 2022. And so there's no reason why we can't, it is a risk, there's no reason why we can't explain to them that we've taken on more debt for the Three Waters. So that is a proposal. So 1492, don't rates fund that. And then the second proposal is we are 3.2. It's 3185. That's the better off funding that we used out of tranche 1 to cover the costs of wastewater and stormwater. We don't have that in 24-25. So if we don't do anything, we're increasing rates by $3.1 million. So our proposal is to not rates fund an additional $3.18 million for the stormwater activity and for the wastewater activity. So what we're saying is yes, we know depreciation is going to go up. We know the accountants are going to go, well, it's gone up $5 million. But we're saying we're proposing to you not to rates fund $4.7 million of that uplift. There is a risk. Of course, there's a risk to that, because that means that we're borrowing $4.7 million because we genuinely have costs. You know, our wastewater, stormwater and water costs money to provide those services. And so there's going to be a $4.7 million hole, and that has to come from borrowings. We're hopeful that we'll get that money back in the short term from the Crown. But it's not guaranteed. So there's an upside and a downside. What does it do to the unfunded depreciation? So as at 1 July 2023, this is the table at the bottom. So the financial strategy has been all around closing that non-rates funded depreciation gap. That's the gap we talk about, 3 million. But for the Three Waters depreciation, for 23-24, we knew there was an uplift of 441. We recommended to the table not to rates fund that uplift because of the Affordable Waters program, and then it was certain. So we've already done it. So we did 441 for 23-24, and now I'm just bringing the numbers down. We're recommending don't rates fund 1.5, don't rates fund 3.1. So what that does mean is the gap, the unfunded depreciation gap grows from 3 million to 8.2. It's actually 3.5 now because it's 3094 plus the 441, so it's sitting at 3535. So that'll grow. So that's the trade-off. By if you accept that, then we're taking on more debt.
Nigel.
So how audit with that?
Yeah. So audit are more concerned about the accounting treatment of the depreciation. How we fund our operations is based on council decisions. So in terms of the Local Government Act, you must have a balanced budget, or it must be prudent. If you don't have a balanced budget, you must show that it's prudent not to. In terms of most councils in the country are doing this. This recommendation is how we fund our activities. Audit just follow that step through. So if you're not rates funding $4.7 million, how are you bridging that gap? Oh, it's through the debt. Have you breached your debt covenant, your financial strategy? No, you haven't. So it's a bit of it's a tick box exercise. This is not illegal, and it's not something that audit would say we can't do.
Okay, that's just checking.
Sounds good.
So the bottom line of that equals.
So the bottom line of that, so it's 4 points. So we're reducing depreciation by 4.7. So if we looked at the waterfall chart,
Where's that? Oh, the waterfall chart.
Which was 6.1, wasn't it?
it's 4677.
Yeah.
So if I go back to the waterfall chart,
Yeah, 6.1.
So depreciation goes up 6.1%. We're proposing reduce the depreciation by 5.1. So you've got a net. So effectively, depreciation is increasing rates by 1%.
Cool. Nigel, do you want to press your button so Shelley can ask a question? Shelley.
So the 8.2 million, where
Yes.
the interest we pay on that is rates funded, and what percentage of rates will that be in a year?
So absolutely right. So we're saying that we're funding that through borrowings. That goes into our total debt calculation. How that works is when we model our debt, we sort of assume that we draw down our debt only halfway, and then it's multiplied by an assumed interest charge. So it's 6 months of interest. Oh, we'll get to when we get to net interest. Yeah, it's coming. But it's more expensive to rates fund it, to put that burden on the ratepayers today than to borrow the money, particularly when we think that we can ring fence that debt and we can actually add that to our $110 million and get repaid that by the Crown. Yeah.
So the extra interest rate on that at 6% is about, what, 250,000 or so, and so that's recoverable? That would be recoverable?
We believe so. So at the moment, I'm just going to keep saying we're in a state of flux. But what the Crown, previous government did say to us is that they would cover, because the initial proposal was a back-to-back agreement. So we would receive, they'd repay our debt over 5 years, but they would cover our holding costs, which included our interest. So if that still stands, we would argue that we should be repaid this debt, but we should also be repaid the interest of that, yes. Of course we would argue that, but it remains to be seen, yes. Okay.
Great.
Net interest. So slide number 8. Okay, so so our net interest. So we've got interest income and we've got interest expense. Interest income is mainly on our pre-funding that we do. It's part of our treasury management policy, and it's one of the reasons why we've got a really strong credit rating. So S&P really value the strength of our pre-funding program. So we're just talking to you about net interest. So the interest income less the interest expense is our net interest. So for the current financial year, it's $8.9 million. We believe in 2024 it's going to go up to $12.2 million. So we're applying our interest rate for the annual plan was 4.17%. Our assumed interest rate for the long-term plan at the moment is 4.96%. So we know we know that we're obviously quite engaged with economists and what's out in the media. Interest rates are going to stay higher for longer. Currently, our weighted average cost of capital is sitting at 4.51%. We know that those interest rates will stay higher for longer, so we're comfortable to have a budgeted interest rate of 4.96, so slightly higher than what we're achieving, but we believe that's prudent to be higher rather than lower, because obviously we try and benefit from the market, but we're not speculating either. We just know that those interest rates will stay higher. So the net increase the increase in the interest charge between year one of the LTP and the current financial year is $3.2 million. And I just wanted to explain that to you because that is no doubt a high number for you. So the key point is we have an existing level of debt that we are going to have to be calculating our interest charge on. So we'll be paying interest on that for the full financial year. And then during the year, we're taking on new debt and we're also paying down debt. And it's at different times of the year. So that transaction is only incurring interest charges for the time that we've actually got the debt. So there's two components. There's debt on existing for the full year. Sorry, there's interest on existing debt for the full year, and then there's interest on new debt at particular points in the year. Now, for planning purposes, we just say the new debt that we take on in 24-25, we'll calculate 6 months of interest. We don't go down to we'll spend $2 million in July. We would be here forever. But just in terms of some of the high-level numbers, so our opening gross debt for the current financial year is $275 million. Our debt will go up $40 million to do the capital works program. So we'll take our gross debt to $315. We have that debt pre-funding, so that comes off. That's a deduction. So our closing net debt for this financial year, or 30 June 2024, is expected to be $255 million. How it works is that's our closing gross debt, which becomes our opening gross debt for the start of year one of the LTP of 315. Again, when we look at our capital works program, we look at what subsidies are we getting from NZTA Waka Kotahi, what are we getting by way of development contributions, what are we rates funding on depreciation, and the difference is what we take on in debt to finish that capital works program. So the net debt increase is $40 million. So it'll take our gross debt up to 355, and our net debt's gone up $40 million as well. So net debt's gone from 255 to 295. So that's the movement in our debt for year one. And so it's we are calculating 4.96% interest on the opening net debt of 255. And then applying the same interest calculation to $40 million of debt through the year. So it gets us to 295. So we put that through the model. It's a complicated model. It comes out at 3.2 at an interest rate of 4.96. So I hope that answered your earlier question.
I've got one for you. I seem to remember a graph somewhere that showed, in terms of the capital works, the percentage of capital works that had been budgeted for and the percentage of capital works that were completed. There was a gap between those things, particularly partnership arrangements with Waka Kotahi because contractors are too busy and they don't get work done. So is this Are these numbers based on 100% of the capital works budgeted for being done?
So, yes and no. So for the current financial year, we've got a capital works budget of a capital works program of $89 million. The debt has been calculated on 70 million. So because we know year on year that with through the best planning in the world, there's always delays. So we have not calculated the debt on delivering 100% of the capital program. So that's the yes. The no is for fast forward a year. So we heard very loud and clearly at one of our presentations, please budget for a capital works program that you'll deliver. And we will talk about this. So we, at the moment, still working through the detail, but there's a capital works program of $71 million proposed for year one of the LTP, which we believe we'll deliver. So actually, for the first time, we believe we can deliver that, so that the debt for year one of the LTP is calculated on $71 million. Yep. Okay, just moving along, inflation. So we know our costs will increase by inflation. We have some contracts where we're contractually obligated to increase the contractor payments by inflation. Standard across local government is to put inflation into the budgets. Auditors do audit this, and they do want to know where did you get your inflation indices from. So we always use Bill, which is an independent organisation that provides local government with our costs unique to local government. So this is what's flowing through our budgets. The lovely thing about Burl is they understand the nature of our activities and our expenses. So we've got for our community facilities, we've got so the latest Burl indicator is 3%. So we've put 3% inflation through those account codes, which is 189. So the grand total of inflation gets to $1.3 million. Revenue, we use what's called the LGCI, which is a composite, basically inflation index that's just provided by Bill. And so the practice of council is to, as a starting point, all fees and charges go up by LGCI, and then we have exceptions to that rule, which we take you through that. So revenue goes up by, all our fees and charges will go up 3.1%, excluding exceptions. And so that gives you, we've got roading, regulatory services, water, transport, energy. The big one there is insurance. So you can see there's a slightly larger amount for inflation there. It's sitting at 20%. So what I will say is, so the entire insurance program of the council has a premium in excess of $2.5 million a year. And for the last 3 years, we have premium increases of at least 20%. They're just going up. New Zealand is riskier. Wellington region from Kaikoura is riskier. We are at the mercy of the market. So we, knowing that our premiums go up at least 20%, we have put 20% into the budget. But this is something that we want to talk to you about later on in the presentation.
I've got a question. This insurance thing is something that everyone's facing, but are you going to have a look at, say, with a fleet of vehicles, how many accidents do you have a year, and should we be now just insuring for third party? Because the cost of the interest on our insurance costs could be way more than replacing a car, or for a lot of other stuff, because that's households are going to have to look at that too.
Well, I think you could look at that as a household, but it wouldn't have a risk profile that was palatable for council. I wouldn't think.
Third party, you'd still be insured.
Yeah, no. Well, though the risk of writing off 5 cars is low, a truck slamming into where they're parked, for instance, the outcome is serious. So we've got to look after our risk in a bit more careful way than that. Yeah. It's a suggestion, I think, but not something we could answer right now. I'll move on to Nigel.
Yeah, I will continue to advocate, as I have before, for self-insurance, for a self-insurance model. And I hope that's something that we're going to continue to look at.
So whilst it's not the focus of the presentation to talk to you in detail about insurance, what I did want to tell you is, so insurance is just one way of transferring your risk. Absolutely, we are working with our insurance broker. We have reported to the Risk and Assurance Committee. We are looking at alternate risk transfer models. One of those includes a managed fund or a self-insurance fund. The council's, in terms of the $2.5 million premium, it's the cost of insuring council's underground assets and our community facilities, all our buildings, is where the premium sits. It's not in the vehicles, but every year we do that. We look at what are our uninsured losses, because we set our deductibles. So, but we do look at it, but that's not where our costs lie. It's mainly in underground assets. So if we were transferring the Three Waters, there is and this is the complication. We would no longer need to insure those assets. And so we've got to be careful. So a self-insurance fund, we become more attractive to the market. We get reduced premiums, which translates to savings on rates. But the timing is everything with what's happening with the transfer of the Three Water assets.
I'm sorry, the in-house presumably meant somebody's done.
Oh, so the in-house is me.
Yeah, oh, good on you. Yeah, I figured that.
Saying 20%. So look, it's better just to. We know nothing's changed. We know that we are looking down the barrel. So some of our portfolio renews 1 November, but the big ticket items renew 1 May, and we've already been given an indication it's at least 20%. Yeah. Okay, moving on. So loss of better off funding. So I really just probably need to just fly through this slide. So one of the ways we reduced the rates in the current year is we had better off funding of 5.7 million.
5.26.
Sorry, 5.26 was the total funding we got in terms of tranche one. As we worked through the detail, we became aware that you could apply it to both CapEx and OpEx. We had originally applied 3.185 million to CapEx, with the blessing of council to reduce the rates by 3.5%. We actually redeployed the 3.18 million. Instead of spending it on CapEx, it was spent to fund stormwater and wastewater activity costs, on the provision that those items there were done within the $89 million CapEx program. So we used the funding to reduce rates, but that's in our capital works program of $89 million. And so unfortunately we don't have that. We don't have that option for 24-25. So tranche 2 is gone. I think tranche 2 was $15 million that the council was looking forward to receiving. So that's gone. And it has created a hole. It's created a hole of 3.1. So immediately what that means is we have to rates fund $3.185 million for wastewater and stormwater. So that's how we came up with the 3.185. That's why we're saying our proposal is don't rates fund 3.185 of depreciation. That's effectively how you balance the numbers. New budget initiatives. So we've all been very busy looking at our budgets, looking at our levels of service, looking at our cost increases, and SLT have been working for weeks on the budgets, as has the rest of the organisation. So the first budget that we looked at had a rates increase of 28%, and the new budget initiatives were well north of 2 million. They were actually exceeding 5 million. So what's been put on the table today is not 5 million, but 2 million. And to get to that point, we applied prioritisation methodology. So we classified those budget initiatives. It was either a council top 10 priority, or it was a increased cost, or it was a changing the level of service and activity. So we'd identified we needed more budget, but what was the main driver? Was it a top 10 priority? And then next to that, we applied a must, a should, and a could. And so we worked through the detail. So a must generally went through the model. A should was a should, and a could was maybe we would table. A should was table with yourselves, and a could do it was a no. So I think the key takeout is that staff and group managers have identified more than $5 million of actual cost pressures to our budgets, but we're putting $2 million on the table. So that was another cost reduction from the chief executive to get us to 12%.
Can I assume that that's that won't form part of a is there an assumption here that won't be a discussion point, that we're going to just accept that that's been done and move on?
No.
I mean, I'm not being challenging about that. It's just
No. So on Thursday, so no, not at all. So effectively, the $2 million is representing an increase to the budgets we already have. And so on Thursday, we'll take you through the detail of the 2 million. Okay, so just projected growth. So so average rates increase the net of growth, so that existing ratepayers know, well, how much have their rates gone up by? So the 12% is after growth. We do a lot of work in this space. This is a combination of the rates team looking at the current rating database, looking at the building consent activity, the new certificates of title that have been issued. We try and set growth on what we can actually see in the pipeline will be a new rating unit in the following year. So for 2024-25, at the moment it's still very much a guesstimate, but it's an informed guesstimate. So it's based on the new certificates of title that we can see either have happened or will happen. We think it'll be 206. We think we'll have an increase of 206 rating units. It is also working with the other teams, and it's looking at, there's a lot of work being done to forecast population growth in the district, as well as the change to household size. So household size equates to rating units as well. So there's a lot of work. It's a combination of seeing what's happening through the rating database and what's happening on our forecast projections for population growth. But at the moment, and this does change, but at the moment we're predicting 0.8% growth for 24-25 and 1.1 thereafter for the next 2 years. So we are going to be locking that in. But as we have in the past, we've actually said 1%, and we've got quite close to June, and we said actually that's not 1%, that's 0.7. So it does vary. But for a long-term plan, you're looking at 10 years, so you are using a whole lot of forecast information. But year one, hopefully you're using a combination of both. Now I'm going to hand over to Chris to talk to this slide.
Hi. What's that? What was that? Yes, we're breaking into groups. No, we're not. You have already been broken into groups. So this was the short list really from our
discussion together around initiatives. You'll note that this is only councillor initiatives that have made it to the table. We obviously had a session on community board proposed initiatives, and we'll be coming back on that. I just wanted to note in terms of next steps, because you will see on this slide that it says it's currently not included in the LTP. We need to do a little bit more work on these the initiatives that have kind of been shortlisted, so we can generate a bit of a picture around what we think an estimated sort of size or scope for those are, so that you can consider them. That will sit alongside the previous conversation about levels of service, because this isn't a free lunch. As in, you're going to have to give some stuff up to get some stuff if that's what you want to do. Obviously, the opportunities around revenue generating initiatives, we'll want to come back and look at in a very sensible way what they might generate in the short and then longer term, because that is obviously a gift potentially for this period in future years. So they're not all like for like, but over the next sort of couple of weeks, we'll be coming back to you if you put your name next to one of those, just to unpack it a little bit more so that we can scope it up slightly. And we'll do the same with the community board related items. We're also just going to go through the budget and check whether any of these are already baked into the budget, for want of better words, meaning that they wouldn't require additional funds because they're already part of what we might be planning to do. There are a couple of items on there that I think might fit in that zone. And so I guess this was just for completeness to recognise that the work that you've done to date, and that there'll be a second step to that. So it's obviously not all done today, as the point of this slide.
So,
We're going to take a short break at 3, just 5 minutes, even if we feel like we're getting towards the end, because we'll all need a stretch. It's been a long day for some of us, particularly people who've had to chair.
So thanks, Chris. So just key message is we're very well aware of the work that you're doing and what you'd like to see, and so hence the slide to let you know it's in our thoughts.
so in relation to that, I'm not sure. So these initiatives, were these the ones that came up from our workshop last week?
I think that was community boards.
Okay.
Yes, so the intention will be to, so this is from the councillor workshop, and there was a community board workshop, so we'll be adding what came out of that.
Yeah, so we will circulate back round the full list, so you can see what's come through that, alongside the ideas repository, so you can see the other ideas which we're holding in a very special and loved pot for further discussion further down the track.
And will it be highlighted whether or not they align with general council priorities? I'm just looking at that motorsport one.
We were going to go through that process. So you agreed a set of prioritisation criteria. So I know Mark mentioned we have kind of looked within the sort of under the hood of what we're currently doing. For the new stuff, you've agreed some of the criteria that you want to look at, and alignment to council priorities is one of them. So at this stage, this was just the shortlist from your original vote. We've got to get down to the real business now and unpack it a bit and assess it against your criteria and come back to you and say, even this will be shortlisted. So we'll do that analysis for you so you can see it, and then you'll ultimately have to have a discussion about how that sits alongside collectively what you'd like to do, including the rates impact of some of those options as well.
Just to save staff a bit of time, those two that are up on the screen at the moment, do we have any appetite for staff to look into them, spend time looking into them further? Can I have a... So who thinks that we should look into a motorsport facility? Anybody else? Yes, I know they used to, but I'm thinking about our council priorities and climate change and everything like that. And also our availability of land to do stuff. Anybody except Kathy? I just think there's no point in staff going down rabbit holes and exploring pipe dreams to
Yeah, not for
at
me,
risk,
thanks, team.
risk of mixing metaphors.
You can
Okay,
count me out.
I think it's a no. Sorry, Kathy.
Yeah,
Yeah, can't win them all. You got your indoor sports on there.
thank you.
Community, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just fulfilling
Yeah,
my
good. You
job.
passed it on. Message received and understood.
All set.
What about fiddling around with rubbish? We're already doing our refuse centre, spending a whole lot of money on that. I think
Yeah,
we're
not for
pretty
me.
covering off our waste stuff already.
It's in the same.
Yeah,
So
nice
in
to
terms
me.
of extra work on top of that in the rubbish space, I think that's so you can cross those two off. And I think the rest
Thanks.
had some merit from my point of view to have another look at. Chris, yes.
Can I just make a suggestion that it might be that maybe this is not for council to do, and maybe it is that we could be thinking about back to our coordination and connection with business. We might be able to see if this is something that someone else.
I don't think that we even want to connect with business to bring motorsports here, from what I'm hearing around the table.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about rubbish to resources, whether there was anybody in that space who was interested in that as business opportunity, but.
I think what we're feeling is we're already spending a lot of money in the rubbish space and already have quite a lot of focus on it. We're about to do our environment strategy. It's not something we would encourage staff to spend a whole lot of time on over and above that at the moment. That's the direction that we're giving.
Okay.
Can I say something at this point? Or
Yeah.
not? Look, I do want to say that while that was a valuable process, I felt very rushed during that session, and I realised afterwards there was stuff that I hadn't put on the table, and I just think it needs revisiting. Maybe the time to do that is when we get the list of what staff have put down. But
I actually think now is the time for that, because we want staff to be able to have a look at it and bring it back alongside the other things. Chris? What do you think?
Sorry, I was waiting for this.
Yeah, we're waiting.
I think it would be valuable for us to be able to say some of the things that we are doing, and I don't mean in the line by line sense of the couple of million that Mark just talked about. I mean in terms of, you've asked us about strategies and what we're doing and what the actions are. You've asked us about a number of things that we are doing work on, that if we're able to show you the long list of stuff we're doing to deliver on your priorities outside of a handful that you're putting on the table as additional opportunities, that might make more sense. I'm just concerned that if we keep adding to the list when we're, it's not to say that you can't add to a list, but the reality is as many as you put on, you're going to have to turn around and prioritise and take back off. So
Yeah, but we get a chance once every 3 years to put our ideas on the table. So I'm quite interested to hear what Liz has to offer, that she feels like she should have inputted at that point, but didn't quite think of it in the half hour we had kind of at that time, or hour. Is it something that would be worth just sharing right now, so we can kind of see what we're talking about?
because like the whole, creativity sector is not mentioned in our top 10 priorities, and yet that's vitally important, and the stuff we need to do in the heritage space, and creativity hubs. We have given an undertaking to Mana Whenua. We'll find ways to tell the history of Mana Whenua in this district. So yeah, there are some things that I feel have possibly been overlooked, but I won't know until I see the full list that staff have been working with.
Okay. Can we park that and make sure, because I think there are quite a lot of us around the table who think that's important. We are doing the creativity strategy. So presumably if we do that well, we'll have...
Yeah, I was just going to note that you've given us feedback that you wanted to see that in the creativity strategy. And when we next talk about the economic development strategy, we have put creativity sector in there as a focus area because you'd asked for it. So we're already starting to, I am going to say, focus energy and resource into those spaces. So that was my point before about saying there's a few steps to go before we've got the full picture of focus on the table. So you were talking about that on the 21st, the ED strategy refresh, and that's in there. We want to have a conversation with you about whether we've got the right focus. The Māori economic development space is also on the table for that. So we've got a wide range of things that we're talking to you about that will be things that fit within baseline of things that we're delivering, and some we've asked for some additional funds, which again you're going to see how that's been allocated in the package.
Does that give you some comfort in that space?
Yeah, I think, you know, as I say, it's probably better if we see the entire long
great.
list rather than brainstorm more wacky ideas today.
I just thought, but that's what we did the other day, and and what I heard was there was a brainstorm wacky idea that people might have had that didn't make it in at this point, and I just thought if there's any more like that,
Or could we feed them
speak
through?
now or forever hold your peace.
Can we
kind of
feed them
thing.
through offline to Chris?
No,
or-
because we all need to agree that they're a good idea. Like we
Okay,
did, we
alright.
need to do the equivalent of dots,
Okay, sure.
basically. But what I'm hearing is that's underway, so you don't need to worry about that one.
Yep.
Who we got? Martin. Oh well, you'll be after Martin.
I want to push back on the convert rubbish to resources. Giving context, we're going to be setting up a sustainability space over at Otahanga. We're already in process with regards to that. We've also got the waste minimalisation strategy coming online in the new year as well. There could be funding opportunities there as well. This is a potential revenue initiatives with regards to something we're already doing per se. I don't know what sort of cost would be attached to that, or whether it's just something we can incorporate so that we are able to take advantage of opportunities as they arise. I'm not sure, but I would want to see it taken out of and stuck in the new ideas repository, because we're actually already in motion in that space.
Yeah, I think that was my thoughts as well on that, Martin. Jocelyn.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason I asked when this was done, I think it was the day that I was on the 2-day Whai Tua Hui, so I didn't attend this. But to me, so we've obviously done the councillor one, and there's been a community board one as well, and I think there's some synergies between the two, and to me it would be probably quite useful to see that list as well, particularly when we look at the ecotourism and resilience initiative there, because I know that through that and what we've heard subsequent to when this occurred, we've heard some ED development stuff like of Ngā Manu. We've heard about our tracks and cycleways, how that actually feeds into that area there as well. So I think it's important to actually extend, obviously that's probably what came up in the day, but I think it's actually bigger than that picture that's given there. And so the other one too is 3, the indoor sports facility. So today in the meeting, we basically put Aotearoa Park on hold. I don't know whether this sports facility, when this was put there, whether that included part of that development at that site there, or whether it was elsewhere.
That's not been decided. The site of it yet. Anything else?
Thank you.
Good question, Nigel.
Ian Castle's Not Memorial Indoor Sports and Rec Centre. The only reason I stood for council, actually, apart from the enormous public pressure to do so, was to get the Waikanae Library across the line, and it's across the line, so I'm pleased about that. And the other real reason was to get this creative strategy happening, this brand Kapiti. What are we? And that's what we are. We are this creative place of art and food and beverage and cafe culture, etc. And so, Yeah, I just reiterate what Liz was saying. This creative strategy for me personally I think is actually one of the biggest ticket items of the 3-year period. So, notwithstanding the fact that we've got now one of the best district-wide galleries around, and we've got the art trail, and we've got all sorts of wonderful things happening. But how do we cement that in terms of our brand? So that strategy is crucial to that. And I haven't really seen much, so I'm hoping that's going to come up, and I wouldn't like to see that as some kind of add-on, because I see it as a fundamental to who we are as a council. Councils like to brand themselves as something. The people might have a, let's become the motorsport and fossil fuels centre of the universe, or go another track. But the other question, because councillors, we've all got our ideas and our initiatives, etc. But I was just wondering at the start, are we looking at a number? Is there a number that, is this the magic number that we're looking for? Now, last time we settled on, we wanted to get it under just tick under that magic number, right? So this time that might be a bit more of a stretch, but is there a number beyond which people think, they'll be out there with pitchforks and what have you? Because I think it's important to actually have something to aim at, something, a specific number that you're looking to do that people can agree to. Because otherwise you can end up making more cuts than you need to make, or you can make less cuts than is desirable. So presumably we'll get someone's got an idea of a number. Because I'm personally comfortable with 12.1.
Is it answerable?
Others won't be.
My answer is 42.
42.
So I believe there is a question and there's a part answer. So there is a number somewhere. We sort of wrap up the session where we look at a slide of how do we reduce the rates further, and there's a couple of options on the table, which effectively is a drop in levels of service. So we've suggested a certain scale to get you to a number. Recently, we presented to you about the financial strategy, and we got a thumbs up that the financial strategy really needed to be a hybrid of the current financial strategy and what was in the previous LTP. So it needed to recognise household cost pressures, and so be affordable or slightly lower for the first 2 to 3 years, and then when we've hopefully received this debt from the Crown, and we have interest rates have come down, inflation has come down, and there's a lot more capacity in the market, the financial strategy will enable probably higher rates in years 3 to 10. So I think we've got you down to 8.9%, and we wanted to test that with you, and quite deliberately, because it would be helpful for us. What is the number? Is 8.9. So we've got to 8.9, and we wanted to test that with you. But bearing in mind the intention, so the financial strategy is still being developed. So the financial strategy gives you your upper limits on rates, gives you upper limit on debt, gives you upper limits on your capital works program. But we wanted to test 8.9 with the table. Bearing in mind we're seeing lots of councils at the moment with headline rates increases of double digits.
More common than not.
Okay, we're going to spend 5 minutes mulling over the number 8.9?
8.9.
8.9. Okay.
Can I just make one last one? Shall yeah.
I just want to. Something like ecotourism fits in with your cultural or strategies, because you want people to come here and bike from Mahara Gallery to the kilns into Otaki to have lunch, and so how are we going to see how that all fits in, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel for all of them. If we can have a budget that covers a lot of different things in the community.
Will that be part of the briefing on the refresh of the economic development strategy?
Yes, and I guess that's what I'm trying to signal. At the moment, you've got a bit of disparate lines of things. when we start bringing the next lot of stuff to the table, is going to start packaging it up. So, for example, economic development, some of these will line up with that. They'll also deliver on the creative strategy. They'll also deliver on this. So, one of the things we're proposing, potentially you could think about, is supporting things that achieve more than 2 or 3 of the things that you're interested in, because it means you get better bang for buck. So that was an example of that. You don't need separate money for creativity if you can achieve it through one thing. Yeah.
Sorry, we have to use the microphones because we've got a couple of people online.
Telling the story.
And I've got Glenn with his hand up as well. But first of all, we've got Nigel.
Oh, sorry, yeah, just the exercises that we've been running through with Chris has been about priorities, right? And I think it's worth, remembering that this is a 10-year plan, and so everything doesn't have to go in years 1 and 2. And historically, you'll see long-term plans, and if you chart what the prospective rate rises are, they kind of go like that, right? Because it's all the stuff gets pushed out into the out years. So I don't think people need to be too worried that their pet project isn't going to happen. Like, it can still be in the LTP, but it might not be in the first couple of years of the LTP. So I just think it's worth bearing that in mind. Yeah.
You might get a motorsport facility one day, Kathy.
Well, it's a live document, an LTP, isn't it? So it gets revisited, but there'll be no oil by time.
Oh, there might be electric cars zipping around. That would be good, wouldn't it? So Glenn, did you want to say something, and then we're going to have a stretch.
I've gone red.
Oh yeah, nah. I've just blackballed you, I think, Rob. I'm more redder than you. So
red is not a license to speak.
So 8.9%. I think that's, if you look at our waterfall chart at the start of the briefing, I don't know actually how you would get it any lower, to be honest. And I think obviously we'd all like lower, we'd like 4 or 5%, but I think the reality is when you look at the loader on the waterfall chart, that's what we're it's not out of the way or unreasonable. But I would say around economic development is in terms of long-term plan, I think the council's role should be setting the environment and setting the regulatory framework for private sector to thrive, not necessarily building major infrastructure. I'm not saying we shouldn't build no infrastructure, but we need to be very careful that we don't overextend in areas and actually just encourage and set the parameters for private sector to do that for us. Would be my sort of musings over some of the economic stuff, over rates increases in infrastructure. Yeah, that's just my thoughts at the moment.
Could I just get some clarity about what we're talking about, just to make sure we know what we're talking about with the 8.9? That is what we're heading for, at what we're looking to head towards, not what we've managed to achieve in savings at the moment?
Correct.
Yeah. So it's what we hope to be able to get to after we...
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that wasn't directed specifically at you, Glenn. That was my own question.
Yeah, no.
You finished? That was really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, really interesting. Thanks, Mark. Really good. I like the way the council is being very prudent, and I like the strategic intent from the council at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
That's it.
That's really good to hear, because I know they've worked really hard to get us.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Rob, did you want to say anything before we have a wee stretch?
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, this isn't a finite list, and we've yet to have 1 or 2 more workshops, and I think we'll summarise it after all of that. Is that right? Just clarifying that.
So I think Chris is pressing your button.
Hi again. Look, we'll be bringing together the work that happened this month. So from the councillor session, the community board session, what we believe is shortlisted from your original voting, the longer list that was also sitting there, which Nigel quite helpfully said, don't panic everyone, that list is sitting there to go. There might be further opportunities down the track to pop those items where you agree that they should be popped into that future pathway, remembering that you're working on Vision Capity, and the idea is that we're looking at the pathways to get to the future. So no doubt some of those things are going to pop into that pathway, but it doesn't mean that it's happening next year or in this 3-year period. So what we're focusing on at the moment is what we want to look at either next year or in that 3-year period, and that's the short list. I will come back to you with the whole thing. Some of these on here, we are proposing we need to do a little bit more work on, and we would target the people who had the idea in the first place so that we can put that in front of you so you've got something to grip hold of, and you can kind of ballpark it in terms of its impact, because it would be inappropriate of us to not at least give you a glimmer of the impact to rates and the things that you're talking about. So that will be coming through as well.
The other thing I'd point out is that this council hasn't done it before, but Horowhenua did it last year, and that's a long-term plan amendment. If something changes or there's a really good initiative that comes along, or there's stuff that comes through our Vision Capity work, which is clearly something that our community is interested in doing or progressing, or a change of direction, or there's natural disaster or whatever, you know, then that is an option that's open to us, and we can do that. You know, we're not completely stuck.
Thank you all. Thanks for clarifying that. I'll just go on a bit further. In my view, the intensification act that the government have forced on us is a wacky one for our urban design, and the whole character, puts the whole character, the built form of Kapiti at a challenge. And I think if we could bring that forward, we have an opportunity to have that reformed or even repealed by the new government. And I'd ask the council if they could look at that as a priority with regard to the urban.
That might be something that's more a district plan discussion than a long-term plan discussion, but a really good time to kind of put it on the table while we're talking this long-term kind of vision.
Okay.
Thinking. So yeah, good to get that in the mix. So we're going to take a 5-minute breather. Only 5 minutes, just a quick stretch, just so that we get to the end and keep concentrating.